Told you, he's a loud brute. Okay, so
That's all right. I
in
like it.
so in 5, 4, 3, 2. Hello there, whoever you are, wherever you are, whenever you are. It's me, your favourite friendly furbolg, Addison, back with the pod of many things, back with another interesting episode where we're going to be talking about stories, telling stories, writing stories, publishing stories with my guest Joe Hilliard, also known as J.V Hilliard. So, hi Joe, how you doing?
Hello, and thank you for having me today. I appreciate it.
Yes, it's fine. It's fine. We've done a bit of ice breaking before we've started recording, and just so we can get a feel of talking to each other. But so I've got to know you a bit. But for those people who will listen to this on YouTube or on podcast apps, how about you give us a bit of the blurb of yourself, if you would?
Sure. Well, my name's Joe Hilliard, as you mentioned. My author name is J.V. Hilliard, and I write primarily in the fantasy adventure genre. So if you like Dungeons and Dragons or Sword and Sorcery or anything from Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings, all the way down to some of the self-published stuff that's out there these days, I think you'd like my work. As you can tell, I'm American, and I live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The kind of stuff that I'm focusing on right now is my first book in a trilogy known as the Last Keeper.
Mm. Yeah. First off, didn't realize you were from Pittsburgh. Massive fan of the Steelers. I don't know if that's.
Well, there you go. Yeah,
there we go. It's destiny.
That's exactly right. So if you like the Steelers, you've got a friend here, my friend. We are born and swaddled in the hospital in terrible towels. So,
oh mate, hearing somebody else know that, I'm like, yes, but yeah. So no, that's brilliant. Thank you very much for coming on. So I suppose the first thing, because we're primarily a tabletop RPG podcast, we do see some other things. We are the pod of many things, but
of course, yeah,
we're primarily tabletop. So have you got you mentioned Dungeons and Dragons as something that might link people to your books? Do you have experience with Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder, or anything like that?
I sure do. It's all of the above. I've been playing D&D since I was 10. I go back to D&D. I was a little young for the first box sets of Dungeons and Dragons, but I have them. And I started playing with the advanced Dungeons and Dragons stuff all the way through 5e now, and played a variety of other related tabletop RPGs. So you mentioned Pathfinder, GURPS back in the day, and anything that was related to TSR. So Top Secret for espionage games, and Star Frontiers for like the sort of the sci-fi fantasy stuff. But I've wandered into some of the Star Wars games. I've wandered into some of the Star Trek games in the past. So sci-fi fantasy and that kind of stuff I've been doing now for 30 years. And most of that time I've been a dungeon master or a game master. So I've had a chance to take some of those experiences and some of those campaigns and wrap them into the creation of a realm, which I'm using now to write my books. So you're absolutely right.
Oh, that's pretty cool. So mainly GM. Have you played a lot, or are you like the quintessential forever GM for your group as well?
Probably the forever GM. Although I will have to say right now I am playing a half-elven ranger who is a his multi-class sorcerer, but is it's the first time I've actually played as a player in 15, 20 years, maybe. Most of my time is the forever DM. Yeah.
Oof. I kind of, pardon me, sorry, I kind of feel bad now because I was going to say it must be a long time, but then you say 15, 20 years, and my experience my foray into D&D is nowhere near that long, and I've mostly been the DM. So but yeah,
Yeah,
You
you get
obviously
used
meant,
to it though. It builds on you. It's like once it's almost like that's the player that you are, and you get used to playing multiple characters as non-player characters, and and you get to you see the game from a different perspective is one that's controlling the adventure while allowing the characters to kind of move the needle and move it along,
yeah,
and they'll always do things you don't expect them to do. But I wanted to play, especially with 5e. It was the first time, it's you want to always want to play new games, sit on the other side of the table a bit. And I've been enjoying this, and I've got a longtime friend who's played nearly as long as I have, who's now getting his first shot at DMing. So a lot of fun.
it must be nice to watch somebody have that first shot. Like I quite like that, when seeing someone who wouldn't usually do it step into that role and flourish in it is really cool. So
Yeah, and he was always capable of doing it. It was just one of those things where, I think that everybody enjoyed playing and I enjoyed DMing, so no one questioned it. And so this time around, I said, hey, you got a new edition. It was our first time taking characters through it. Why doesn't somebody else take a shot? And I'd like to have a shot at playing, and it worked out very well. And we're now close to 15th level, and maybe hopefully closing out this current campaign, and we'll see what happens for the next one, if I take the DM role back or if I continue to play.
yeah, that is pretty cool. Did you not? So one of the things I'm feeling at the moment with being a forever DM is I think for the first time ever, yeah, for the first time ever, I'll say, is I'm beginning to really feel like DM burnout. Like I've run multiple like year to year and a half long campaigns, gone to quite high levels, and this is the first time where I've ever went, you know what, I just don't want to do this anymore. Like, have you never felt like that? Like 15 years, I've been doing this for 4 or 5, so for me to feel that way, it must. Did you not feel that way for 15 years? That's
Oh, I
insane.
sure did. Yeah, you get that a lot of times. It's because your personal life, whether it's family or career, it's not like when you're in high school or in college and you can play 2 or 3 times a week. When you like right now, my group, we play via Zoom or Skype on Sundays from 6 to 10 our time, and it's only once a week. It's mostly, we might get in 3 or 4 times a month, and everyone's grown up. They've got kids, they've got families, they've got professional responsibilities, and so sometimes the burnout comes from focusing on other things and then not being prepared for Sunday.
Mm,
But the other side of it is too, like you said, if you've been doing it for long enough and you want to play, because you use a different part of your I swear you do. I mean, even though it sounds strange, I think you use a different part of your brain when you're DMing, because you're controlling the game. You're there setting the stage and putting the fence around it, and then the characters invariably blow a hole in the fence, and you've got to react to what they're doing, and why they've done something you didn't plan for them to do, and that takes its toll on you. And what I've found is, flip it on them. Like when there's a part, even if you've planned, like I am a planner, whether it's Dungeons and Dragons or writing. I'm not one of these pantsers that you make things up as you go. I always know the end before I even start.
mm,
And sometimes what I find is, when it starts to go stale or you feel that there's a level of burnout, blow it up for you and your group by doing something having something crazy happen in the adventure that no one expects. Like they might have figured out the end, then throw them a curveball, throw a wrench into the works, and make them figure something else out. And then that gets my creative juices flowing, because now I'm on the spot. I've changed my own adventure, and now I've got to go back and kind of retool, and even some cases kind of reboot, and get them ready, just to shake it up a bit so that it's not the same thing all the time. And that's how you just have to fight through it. It's the same thing when you get high end characters, you're just tired of playing the character, but you need to finish the campaign. I think sometimes that kind of fatigue sets in on the PC side too.
I do think there is like a bit of your theory about the brain thing has legs, basically, is what I'm trying to say. Because I feel like as a DM, like you're looking at a thing from like a 3D angle, looking at it from all the angles as well. You're like, okay, so they could do this, this, and this. And as a player, you're just on the ground, aren't you? Like it's almost like you're playing drone as a DM, but you're just one person on the ground as a player. So like you have to, as a player, you can just go, oh, I'm going to do a knee jerk thing. Whereas as a DM, you have to, even if you're a pantser, you kind of have to go, there are these possibilities that could happen. Like maybe prepare for some of them, or maybe think of some for all of them. It's
Yep.
I get that brain thing does have legs.
Yeah, you just have to throw. You've got to be prepared for them to throw. And as DMing, as long as I have, you get kind of used to it. Like that even though I might have planned something, or even sometimes when you're using a pre-made module or campaign, from was like we recently did the Curse of Strahd, and I had DM'd through that way back when it was the original Ravenloft, and then again several years later when they came out with the box sets, and then it kind of went away for a while, sort of into the archives, and because we've done it so long, and then when they revived it with Curse of Strahd, everybody wanted to play it, and everyone kind of had in the back of their head what they were going to expect, so you have to throw something new at them. I think that's important too, so that they're hoping for it. You give them what they want, and then sometimes that lures them into the plot that you've got. But like you said, you've got to make sure that there are variables, and certain players are variables themselves. Sometimes they're just their own spark plugs, and something will set them off, and they'll do something crazy that you didn't expect. And that's the challenge of being a DM, but that's what also makes it fun.
Yeah. I think Strahd's good with that as well, because I quite like the fact that you can take Strahd two very distinct routes. As a antagonist, you can take him as like this like bloodthirsty, young, ambitious like vampire, like yes, or you can have I've created my own realm, like this place bows to my will. Why are you trying to mess that up? Or you can just have him as like this depressed old guy. I like both versions of him quite nicely. Like the one where it's like, oh, I fucking hate this. Like, I hate this. Please, like, put an end to me.
Yeah, well, I've taken him in the most recent time we played. It was sort of like the path of redemption, like what happened to him before. He caused it, and then over a period of time realizes what he lost by going, to the dark side, right? And so it's this, and in a way, he's cursed to haunt the PCs, and there's that ego that comes with being a super genius that won't allow you to be defeated. But it just as in the real story, the real Bram Stoker sort of Dracula, he wants to reclaim his old life. He would go back in a minute if he could, kind of thing. And so there's this dichotomy that runs in his head, and I'm sure it does in most super genius heads, where he can't give up what he's done, but he would love to go back to his old love, right? And find a way of rehashing that. And even if you go back to the original Ravenlofts, the first Ravenloft module, you run into this in the second Ravenloft module, which is the House on Griffin Hill, which has to be from like the late 80s, early 90s. I don't know when it was. He's actually trying to do that in a sense. He's got this house, and he's building this machine that's going to suck out his vampirism. And so it's really kind of it depends on how you want to play it. But like you said, you could play it in many different ways. And and with those many different ways, you can you could play that over. It's sort of an evergreen in that respect. You can have a different Strahd every time.
Yeah, I think if I was to run it, and hopefully none of my players who usually play with me, is I'd play him as like the tired old man who wants to die, but like his pride won't let him go down without a fight. So he's just, what he thinks is like small like barriers in the way of his demise. He's like, oh, just all right, if I put this out there, then it looks like I'm trying almost. Like then he realizes that he doesn't realize, because he's so out of touch with everything, that like, no, that's really dangerous to like normal human beings and stuff like that. Like I'm trying to like go on then, like come kill me, but I'm gonna pretend that I'm trying not to die, and then everybody's like, no, dude, stop! Like you're actually trying to kill us. It's like, oh, sorry. Like, I like that idea of like this big scary place, and then just the guy who's running it, like, finally someone's here to like do something about this. Kind of like that person who's been waiting for the engineer to come for a long time. Like,
That's
please come
right.
sort my internet, please. Like,
Yeah, yeah. No, I did that with my latest group. They had finished a previous related adventure in a different part of the Ravenloft realm, and they
mm,
came onto this cemetery, and this ghost-like creature comes out of the grave and throws these scrolls at them. And I actually had scrolls written by a friend of mine and had them
mhm,
mailed to everybody and told them not to open them up until we played. And the scroll, was written on this parchment paper with, calligraphy, but of course it was a computer generated pen with a seal on it from Strahd von Zarovich, and it was just excellent. It just got everybody into the mood, inviting them into Barovia and pulling them in. It was that physical touch in the real world that brought them into the game world, and it was, instead of just being invited by the Burgomeister or whatever, like they do in the original. This is an invitation from Strahd himself to come get me. And
yeah.
that, to your point, that was it went really well.
No, that could be cool. I'll make note of that. You must be really excited that they're bringing out that new book then, like the Guide to Ravenloft or whatever. Somebody's got it's got a name,
Yeah,
somebody's
Van
name in it.
Yeah. So that was, they had the Van Richten guide. I got the revamped one that comes in sort of like a coffin like box a few weeks ago. And then they've got the guide, the Van Richten guides to whatever that they're just rebooting now. So
Mhm.
I'm a big fan. It's one of my favorites. I like those. I like the Tomb of Horrors, and then when they kind of came back with the reboot of that most recently, we played through some of that, and then the Slave Lord modules from back in the 80s and early 90s. I thought they were well done, and of course anything that's related to the Underdark, I'm a
Mm,
big fan too. I think that those themes have been constants, whether they were TSR, Wizards of the Coast, or any of those things. They've done well with those as a franchise or sort of like a property, and reboot them every now and then for the next generation to enjoy.
yeah, no, I think so because like I've got my wife's uncle gave us his I think it's AD&D, or it might be second. No, second edition is AD&D, isn't it?
It is, yeah. That
Yeah,
was,
I
yeah.
think he gave us his AD&D Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master's Guide, and Monster Manual. And like even looking through that, some of like the Underdark creatures and stuff like that, I was like, oh no, these are cool. Like, this has always been cool, sort of thing.
Yeah, no, and I think that the Salvatore novels, the Dragonlance novels, some of even the Strahd, like, individual novels that they brought out, back in the '90s and early 2000s, so you can read them. It was like the franchise of your favorite Dungeons and Dragons campaigns are there for you to read and enjoy while there's downtime. Like there's that simmer down period where you don't want to get too much of it. Too much of a good thing's never good either. So it's like there's just enough there to keep you reading through it, and then they would kind of bring it back. And I thought that was sort of very Disney-like for them, where they take a movie and they put it in a vault for 10 years, and when it comes back out, everybody's excited to go see it again. I think
Yeah,
that's the thing here is like, giving me Strahd 10 years later, hey man, I'll be first in line for that.
yeah, that was pretty cool. So moving on from like tabletop RPGs, because it's obvious that they've had a massive impact on you, and like I think hearing you talk about and your favorite bits of Dungeons and Dragons, like the Underdark and like Strahd and these sorts of characters, and what we talked about before we started recording, and like the preview that you've sent me of your work, of those things have had a massive effect on your work. So I think would be a good chance to like segue to talk about your work, like what you do as a novelist, and as an author, what do you think is the unique selling point? Because me and my friend Leon used to talk about these a lot. What do you think is the unique selling point of your fantasy adventure novels? Because they seem to be, fantasy is having a massive renaissance, as is Dungeons and Dragons and stuff like that. Like, more people are getting involved in things like the Wheel of Time. I still need to read that. And the fantastical seems to be making a massive resurgence. So what would be your unique selling point as an author for your adventures?
Sure. So, I've created a tangential realm and I've done that over a 30-year period. These are, what I've done is gone back and strung together the good and the bad that I've created as a dungeon master, and created my own realm, which I'm calling Warminster. And so the realm will offer me the ability to write many stories. The first of three will be in an area known as Thronehelm and Castleshire, which are these major cities in the realm that I'm starting with the first three novels, but then I can go to other parts of the realm and bring in and sort of revive past adventures. And even some of the main characters will have names of characters that used to be PCs or NPCs, borrowing that over the course of playing the game for 30 years, while also being unique. I can't, Dungeons and Dragons has their own brand, and I'm not going to be that. But there are certain things that Tolkien has offered us that have become ubiquitous in the fantasy realm. There's nothing, Games of Thrones, for example, they borrowed dragons, or elves, dwarves that you find in other things. Those things I think will be commonplace in anybody's realm, while I'm also creating new creatures, while I'm also creating new races, while I'm also creating new classes. And I think that it's, I want the reader to read the characters as if they were a player character, right? Like they were living the life of this PC that was going through an adventure. And sometimes those adventures last 3 novels, other times they last 1. But I think it's sort of the memorialization of 30 years plus of playing the game, as well as having the opportunity to create my own realm and invite people into it, which is really exciting for me. Giving them a chance to see what's been rolling around in my brain during that time and what we've done. And of course, you're not playing the game when you're reading. This is for anybody. You don't have to be someone that's an RPG fan. You can just be a fantasy fan, or someone that likes sci-fi fantasy. I mean, I find that folks that I've that have read my work come from those genres specifically, and then a little bit of the horror suspense sort of genre as well. So I think I've wrapped a lot of that into it, and I think that that's if I had a property that I want to be on in that space as a novelist, that's where I want to be. Something unique, but it's also tangential to many things that people are familiar with, so it's easy to transition into.
I quite like the idea of that, like that. Yeah, I asked you for a unique selling point, but your unique selling point is that it's not actually it's not unique in a sense of that it's so removed from everything, but that the stories themselves are unique, but they are familiar enough for you to jump onto. I like that idea of like these are universal fantasy stories with my twist on them and have like my style. Is that that's what I kind of got from that, at
That's
least.
exactly right. I think that everybody has their own opinion, whether you're a Game of Thrones fan or a Lord of the Rings fan, and those are two different distinct groups of people. In those realms, there's something about it that's, that sword and sorcery exists in all of them, and it's that ubiquity that I think that brings fans to the books, or fans to the shows, or fans to the movies. And sure, there are aspects of my realm that are unique to it that no one else has done or thought of, or at least I don't think they have. But what also has played out is, I'm writing a story about something that I've actually done in my head as an RPGer, which I think, to your listeners and your fans would be interesting to them, because they've all had that too. I mean, those memories are their memories, even though they really didn't happen. They actually did. In your head, you played out that module, or you played out that campaign.
We talk about this all the time. We actually talk about this all the time. Like the thing is with D&D is it's so personal, even though it didn't happen to you and it didn't even happen, you say, do you remember that time when I did this or you did that and we had to, like, it's all personal and like personal pronouns. It's not, it's never, oh, do you remember that time when my character did this? It's like, do you remember when I had to do this to save your ass or something like that?
That's right. Or have you ever been in a conversation where you've stumbled over something and you think it's you know the difference between the fantasy and the reality, but you still identify that person as doing it, and something happens in life that reminds you of that about their character and not it's just like
Oh, yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
there's an overlap that happens there, and I think it's exciting and it's escapism, right? Like we all that's why we all gravitate. If you like this genre and you like this kind of gaming, that's why you do it. I mean, we all have enough reality in our lives, whether it's paying the bills or health of the family or making sure the kids go to school or all of the above. We've got enough reality. This is our escapism, and it's us being able to not only enjoy it but remember those things. And now I get a chance as an author to, as I said before, sort of like save those things and memorialize them in a book that I hope someone's willing to buy and read and enjoy just as much as I did as I was DMing it or I did as I was playing it.
Yeah, definitely. Like that's one of, I do find it funny, like, because your thing of like having a world that you can like play in, so with your friends, in order to create stories, or have multiple stories happen to like seemingly unrelated characters and stuff, is something that I also toyed with my campaign setting, which is the Isle of Ramph. So the Isle of Ramph is an island where every 4 years there's this thing called the Moonshay, where for a whole season, so 3 months, it is pitch black night, and things go terribly wrong. Like the planes shift, and like you've got dark elves coming up. They're called Undel because like under elves, like it became bastardized.
I like that. I like that.
So like, but because of this happening, the world, that island is made up of people who are so fucking hard ass because they've gone through all this shit and they lose so many friends every 4 years, like that they're just hard as nails. And so like, and their whole culture is built around preparing for this thing to appear. So I find that quite interesting because I've tried to make like stories kind of like the Avengers, like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where these characters who seem unrelated all have stories of their own, and then they converge at a certain point. And I was starting. I might be cheeky and ask if you could give me some tips on it. My first novel was about my old Fire Genasi wizard called Kindling Prigby.
What a great name.
Yeah, and he basically in the story, I think you can relate to this because he kind of reminds me of one of the protagonists in your thing. In one of the samples that you sent me, is he's like this know-it-all like wizard, like who never kind of got past like he got past being a student but never got to master stage. So he's like in this strange in between, and everybody thinks he's really skilled, and he doesn't think he is. So he's in this weird like dichotomy of like, people rely on me because I've defended this village for like years as a war mage, but actually I'm not that good. There are people that are like 100 times better than me, and it's him growing up into this like, no, you have a wife and responsibility, and even though you're not part of the military anymore, like I'll send you it hopefully if you'll allow me to, and we'll
Of
see what.
course, I'd love to read it. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So the Warminster series, tell us about that, because I think it sounds like a really interesting premise that I pardon me, very sorry. That I quite like the religious connotations of all your work. So could you maybe tell us a bit about Warminster and like where you hope to go with it in the future as a story setting and stuff like that?
Yeah, sure. So the realm in which I'm writing the story is called Warminster, but it's basically named after a set of 7 baronies in the northwestern part of the realm that's known as Warminster. Warminster was a mage that brought those baronies together at one point to be a unified government under one king. But that's only a small part of the realm. The larger part of the realm, um, is one that sees all sorts of different kingdoms, and there's a capital of all capitals known as Castleshire, which is sort of an oligarchy run by the founding families of many of the larger cities all across the realm. And the first novel, The Last Keeper, begins with a young seer, an oracle of sorts, who is learning to control his powers. And he, among other seers around the realm, go to the Cathedral of the Watchful Eye, where they're taught to use their powers, and then eventually they're sent, very much like the maesters may be sent in the Game of Thrones, back to their communities from whence they came, or communities that need their help and guidance, and they're guided by this god Erud, which is a sexless god of knowledge, because why would a god of knowledge have a sex, right? So I have it's almost like its own entity, and Erud blesses them with the ability to see in a variety of different ways, and sometimes it's done through dreams. Other times it's done through using a mirror or a crystal ball or reading the stars. And every one of these seers, known as the keepers of the forbidden or the forbidden knowledge, have a different way of communing with their god Erud. And the which I refer to the gods and goddesses in the realm as the ancients, and the ancients, are active in the realm on a day-to-day basis. They haven't vacated the realm. They don't live there anymore, according to the legends, but they, are venerated, and they provide divine and sometimes wizardly interventions to their favorite pupils, or worshipers, or servants, or acolytes. And so the story starts out with a young boy, 17, almost into an adult, learning how to use this, and he's having this recurring nightmare of this man named Grey Taurus, who is a fallen keeper. He was part of his sect, and something happened to Grey Taurus a number of years ago, and he's having a dream um, of that man, and the two meet in their dreams on a lake, and it's what happens in that first chapter that kind of sets the path for the first book. And Damus Alaric, who is the good main character, the protagonist, and what Grey Taurus is doing, on the other side, and it's their struggle together that brings the powers of their ancient into the fore. And I think it's, the powers of faith, I think, were prevalent in C.S. Lewis and all the Tolkien novels. And in this case, this is a pantheon of gods. It's not a singular god, but there are a lot of those same kind of themes that are embedded in it. And I think that's where it kind of follows along some of the tabletop role-playing games too, where and now that they've sort of been redone by Wizards of the Coast for the 5th edition, you see a bunch of new god or godlike figures, and it's how they come together to play that out in the novel.
That sounds pretty darn cool, like having your antagonist and your protagonist. Like everybody will say that an antagonist and protagonist are closely linked anyway, because of like things like the Darth Vader paradigm that things have seemed to follow since then, and like the idea of what's it called, the doppelganger effect of like they're being the same person but not the same person, like the shade effect. But I think that idea of them having them like almost work together is an interesting concept. Like, and even though they're not working together in the strictest sense, like the fact that what they are doing is drawing them closer together is really interesting. I like that. I really like I really liked the character of Grey Taurus in the sample that you sent me. I liked some of the brave choices you made with him, and like how else could I put it without spoiling it? Because I want people to go see it, to go find it and read it, because it is really good. I think he's a very interesting and like layered and complex character that is just it's just such a good character. You've made such a great choice with that character that I can't quite get over yet. So thank you for that.
No, I appreciate that, and the kind words too, and I think that's what makes when I look back and I say to myself, I really enjoyed that book, and I'm going to read it again and again. I find a couple of common themes in that, and one of those are what you just said. Layered characters. They just can't be somebody who's cookie cutter. And who they are. I mean, there's got to be something deeper to them, and whether or not let's face it. I mean, we all love Darth Vader, but we hated him for 2.5 movies, right?
Yeah.
But and that's the thing. It's like you love the enemy, you love the villain, but you love him because he has a story, and you might not know it all in the beginning, and so it comes across as something that it isn't, because you're cheering for somebody else, and I kind of liken that to, you mentioned the Pittsburgh Steelers earlier, like the theme of like betrayal, for example, where you've got one of your favorite players leaves and goes and joins another team, and it's like, why did you do that? And you've cheered for them forever, and now they're playing against you, and I'm using that as in the simplest sense, and I think the same thing happens with Grey Taurus in the novel. And it's like, well, does he have a shot at redemption? Does he, where does he choose that path? Or, like you said, without giving away the farm, Grey Taurus, I think, is one of those guys that I've spent a lot of time developing, and there's backstory that's yet to be known in the first book, and there's foreshadowing, and I'm hoping that there are moments in there where people could figure it out right before it happens, and they say, oh, this, and that's the kind of novel you go back and read a second and third time, right? That's the one that the pages are all dog-eared, and that's my hope for The Last Keeper.
Yeah, you go back and you realize other things. I have that with The Name of the Wind and the Wise Man's Fear by Patrick Rothfuss. I read those books.
Yeah.
I've read those books like 3-4 times, and I swear every time I've noticed something new. Like, I'm like, oh, that's shit. Right. Like, that's oh, right. What? Like
it was a good story before I knew this, but now it really makes sense to me. Yeah, it's like, and you cheer for that character. Like, you know how it is too, especially with folks out there that write fan fiction, and folks that are out there doing their own blogs or vlogs or YouTubing. And they're talking about that. There are times where they're cheering for things to happen in the next episode, whatever that might be, movie, TV show, Netflix or novel, and it's like they're part of it. They're bought into it. And then they know, they could know the character's birthday, and stuff like that. And it's things you won't get through the first path, but the second pass you go through, and then you pick up on those nuances. You're like, how didn't I see that? I read it. I know I read it, but now it makes more sense to me, and you appreciate the overall story. And that's what I think happens with The Last Keeper. You're getting an old character that has a story that pops right in the prologue, and you're not sure how to take it. And then immediately, bam, in chapter 1, the villain and the hero come together in their first clash. And it's just, I think that kind of stuff is memorable. It keeps you reading, and it also keeps you coming back to reread. And that's what I think, that's what makes a good story.
Yeah. So 3 things there. The thing about the Steelers and players leaving, I feel like I'm about to have that with Juju Smith-Schuster, which is like, no, don't leave me.
Like, he's such a hero here, you know what I mean? And everybody loves him, and there's just no way they're going to be able to sign him. And so now I've got to see him be an Oakland Raider or something, or a Las Vegas Raider or something like that.
They think he's going to. They think he might land at New York, but I'm not sure. I don't think they'll pick him up.
Yeah, I don't know. He's more of a West Coast guy, but we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. But glad you picked that up.
Yeah. Second thing was we see that like fandom and like that buy-in and that almost like second and third like dive into things to farm, almost to like mine for additional lore. Even our most model example of that would be WandaVision right now, right? Like, I don't know if you've seen that.
I have. I'm only on episode 5, so no spoiler alerts, but I'm
Yeah,
almost through.
but once you get through that, like you've got to have seen like people's theories and stuff about it, like how fervent and like, because they knew these characters so well that they were like, well, this must happen, and then like, yeah, it's insane. And then what was the third thing I was going to say? Like the Juju Smith-Schuster things that hurt me a bit too. It cut too deep for a second there. Um, the fact that you said he might become a raider, and one of my friends is, well, my wife's cousin is like a fervent like Raiders fan, and I'm like, no, you keep taking all our cast offs. Like, you took did they take Bell or did they take Brown at first?
They took AB, they took
Yeah,
Antonio, and
yeah,
Bell went to New York. I just think
yeah.
that, not to get too far afield, but Juju's, he's from California, and Vegas isn't California, but it's close enough, and it's a little different than it is in New York. I'm hoping they can still, throw him a lifeline with the Roethlisberger contract being reworked, but we'll see.
Defo. So yeah. So quick question, and you don't have to tell me this because this is quite personal, and we've only just met. I understand that. It's not a job interview either. So is writing a full-time career for you, or is it like something you do with your job with a day job as well, or?
No, it's actually something I'm aspiring to make a full-time gig. My day job is government affairs. I do a lot of work in Washington, working with tech companies and community and economic development organizations and defense companies and things like that on a day-to-day basis. But I've been doing that for 25 years now, and what I'd like to do is make writing my profession. This is something I've always wanted to do. As you can tell, I mean, I've created. I mean, Warminster itself, I created its own role-playing game. Within the confines of existing role-playing games. And so for me, I have a realm that's ready to go. I can write stories at any time, and it's just something I would love to do. And, having, been published, or being published, I should say, is the first step in that. And I'm hoping that eventually I can transition from one career into the next. And I think that, hopefully that is, writing and staying true to the sort of the fantasy adventure realms.
That's just kind of like how it is in The Mandalorian. That is the way, isn't it? Like, you have to have it as a passion thing on the side, and then hopefully hope that passion can tip the scales in its favor in terms of monetary like value and stuff.
It's exactly right. And this is the time of that this might work out. It's as strange as it is. The silver lining in the pandemic was that much of what I did became virtual, and I didn't need to travel as much as I did. And so
Yeah.
those hours where I would have been spent in a car or on a plane or in a hotel somewhere or being dragged out by clients to do something, instead I had the chance to sit down and write something. And and then I sent it to a friend of mine who is a professor at a local college here, and she said, this is publishable. And at that point I started to seek that opportunity, and it worked out really well. Did I lose you?
Hello.
Yeah, I'm here. I can hear you now. I don't know what happened
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. There was a bit of a fluctuation. So we can. So sorry about that, everyone. We had a bit of a technical glitch. So you were saying about one of your friends said that your work was publishable.
Yeah, she had written a memoir of her own, and she's a writing professor at a local community college. And I had fed her the book to see what she thought, and with some coaching and development editing, she said, "Hey, this is a publishable work," and that's sort of how it led to my introduction to Dragon Moon Press, which is my small publishing but genre specific publishing house in Canada. I think that they liked the story too, and I got introduced to folks that had worked with them in the past, and it was one of those like one for one. I sent it out to one person, and that person liked it enough to publish it. So that's what we're doing, and I like the idea of it being a small shop, because I had kicked around the concept of self-publishing, and I decided that I wanted to, knowing that someone else wanted to publish it, how do we do that? And I've always been an entrepreneur. I've had the opportunities to do, and own my own businesses in the past. So, for me to be part of that and buy in with that and share royalties in that in a way that might be greater than I could have gotten from a larger house, I see this as a way for me to not only, serve my entrepreneurial spirit and be part of it, put in that sweat equity to make it happen, but also I think, it allows me to learn the industry a little bit better, where I'm an active part of publishing and marketing and advertising and being out on the road when those days come back to us. And I think
Yeah.
that's really important to me. And I'm not sure that if I would have been successful sending it to a larger house and someone wanted to, I mean, I'm not opposed to those kind of things. I just think this might be better suited for who I am.
Yeah, I remember. I'm gonna do a tell. I don't know if you play like Telltale video games, but the little things just appeared in the corner. That's like Addison will remember this because hopefully with your coaching and stuff like that, maybe I can get on the Dragon Moon thing in Canada, even though I'm British. Get me on there, Joe. I need you. I
Well,
need
they'll
you
let
right
you
now.
slide. Yeah, they're for us. They're our friends. For you, you're still family. So I'm
Yeah,
let you slide.
yeah. But I was going to ask you about publishing, but you've basically answered my question. Like
Oh,
you sent it to a friend. They thought it was publishable. They introduced you to your publishing house. Did I get that correctly? They introduced
yeah,
you, or
yeah. Actually, it was a referral to a development editor who eventually put me in touch with the house.
Mm,
So, I think for me as a first time author, I've written in my career. I've written many things. I've written, legislation. I've written grants. I've written contracts. But what I haven't written was prose. And I didn't know, when I was writing these stories, even though I've read, good to great novels, it's when you're doing it yourself, it's hard to pace things, and learning from those who have done it. And they took a really rough first draft that was good and helped me make it so that it was great. At least I think it is. And then, that's when the intro was made to Dragon Moon and my publisher.
oh, that's sick. So and like you share royalties in that now because of like so have you invested in Dragon Moon or
No, well, I've invested in my novel, right? So
yeah.
like, yeah, there's not just the downtime it takes in writing it and the creative juices that go into it, but on the basis of they're not going to have the budget to do what some of the larger houses would do. So me putting in some of my own time to make sure that I'm maximizing profit and sales by going on a book tour when we're allowed to do those things again, and blog tours and podcasts like this, those are things that I think if I were at a larger house, maybe they'd be set up for me. But
Hmm.
as you know, I actively sought you out, right? I'm
Yeah.
here trying to promote myself and find an audience that's going to like the kind of stuff that I'm producing. And I think that kind of thing, and that's what I meant before about entrepreneurship. It's just that grind of, it doesn't matter to me if it's an 18-hour day. I'm going to do it because I've done it in the
Mm.
past for my businesses, and I've done it for the people that I've worked for. And so for me, I actually like that. I like being able to control what I want to do, when I want to do it, put in as much effort as I can, um, as being told, as opposed to being told where to go. So, but again, my experience with large houses are very limited. It's just I've talked to a few of them. I've never really shown them any of my stuff. It was just the fact that I thought that it was this allows me to play in the game and at a greater role, sort of as my own CEO of my own property,
Yeah.
while doing it with
You're
a
like your
partner
own
to take
agent.
care of me. What's that?
You're like your own agent as well. Like you're like your agent, your publicist. You're like your whole team as well as your liaison to the company. So you have like a more a bigger control stake in your book than maybe a larger publisher house would give you, sort of
Right.
thing.
And what she has is mailing lists, and what she has is contacts that are going to get my books on the shelves at Barnes and Noble and other places like that. Um, you know, but I get a chance to go out there and really market myself and my books, in a way that I want to do it. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah, that is cool. That is cool. I was going to also ask you about Dragon Moon Press, but you've answered that in the fact that they just sound awesome and they're from Canada. So yeah, like I think the last thing like I want to ask you about like your novels and stuff like that is so there's a strong like the we've already said about the strong like religious tone and stuff like that and like the suspense and like the fantasy element, but you've also like got small stories that you're like publishing online on your website, is that true?
So there is an online magazine called Altered Reality Magazine.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
Altered Reality has a handful of authors like me that they've invited to be part of their online mag. And so, if you go to alteredrealitymag.com, you'll see there's a serial button at the top. When you click on the serials, you'll see there's, 6 or 8 of us that are in there, are authors that are writing a story, one small chapter at a time. And my serial, The Element of Time, just launched there on March 1, and it's again fantasy adventure oriented. It's a little different than what you're going to read in the first couple of chapters of the Last Keeper, but it's along the same path. So if you're a fan of the genre, or you're a fan of anything that's sci-fi fantasy related, I think you'll enjoy the trip. I'm hoping to take everybody
Oh,
too.
I've misunderstood this. I thought this was a serial on your own website. So this is like some sort of online like magazine anthology thing.
That's right. That's right. So, yeah, you have a chance, go click on alteredrealitymag.org, or excuse me, .com. And, there's a number of authors they have. They have a group for poetry. They have a group for serials like mine and others. And they invite people through the sci-fi fantasy genre to publish, on throughout the magazine.
Yeah, and so I've got a new hook now. I'm sorry. I was going to say that. I was saying that was the last question, and then we were going to talk about how D&D's influenced like your creative process. But I want to talk about this like online zine thing. So how did that come about? Do you have to be published? Is it like a subscription service? Like how what like
No, it was actually a Facebook conversation that had happened I'm a member of a number of sci-fi fantasy online groups. And Kelly, the woman who runs the magazine, she and I got into a discussion online within the group about a certain topic, and then she had asked me what I was writing about, and I told her what I was doing, and she asked me to go and take a look at the online mag, which I did. And I commented about what I liked about it, and she eventually invited me to be part of the serials stuff that they were doing. And so it took me a month or so, and I put together a couple of episodes and sent her the first, and just launched it there. And there are others that are like me too, that are part of that. And some of them I know she works with on a variety of projects. On mine, it's just The Element of Time, which is that first episode I mentioned earlier. But for the most part, and I'm advertising that on my website, is something that I'm working on, but that it's through that. And I'm certain that there are other altered reality magazines out there, that go under a different name and provide that same opportunity for aspiring authors, and that's what I'm trying to do there.
oh no that sounds really cool. Like I'll go check that out, and obviously I'm gonna link most of like your website, and I'll probably now link the Altered Reality website and your serials too underneath this on YouTube and stuff. So
Thank
thanks
you.
for that.
That's great. Yeah, no, thank you.
Um, but yeah, no, that sounds really cool. I need to have more of a personal conversation with you about this because, like, as a teacher, like I'm an English teacher at what we call secondary school. So for you, would be like middle and high school.
Right.
So sometimes I do. I wanted to write for a long time, but obviously like I said, like the internships and stuff, and I couldn't really get that. So I was like, okay, I need to make money. But now I kind of feel like maybe now's the time. So hopefully, if you allow me to, like you said, you'd kindly read my stuff, maybe give me some tips or point me in some good directions, and I'll hopefully be able to join you on one of those one day.
I would love that and help you in any way I can. I mean, if it wasn't for people helping me, I wouldn't be on the path that I am. And so if I can pay that back in any small way, I'd like to do that for anybody that's an aspiring author, because there are things that I've learned along the path, especially over the last year, that I didn't know before I started it. And if it wasn't for those people, I wouldn't be where I am, and happy to do it for you or anybody else who's looking for a piece of
it. Clip it, boys and girls, clip it. He said it. No, but yeah, thank you. We'll talk about that in the more private things, because that's something you don't do like in this sort of search situation. But thank you very much for that. So the last thing I want to talk about before I do our deck of many questions segment, which is our end segment, where I have a deck of like questions. I get you to choose a random number, and then you get to ask that question. Some of them are from the internet that we've pulled out. Some of them are from people who've listened and dropped questions our way. So the thing I wanted to talk to you about is the fact that you've played D&D, and you've talked about extensively about how D&D or tabletop RPGs, sorry, because they're not all a dragon game, have been essential in your process of becoming an author and in your writing and creating this realm that you now set your stories in. Do you think that the joint storytelling experience is something that it is just about tabletop RPGs, that is just something we gravitate towards about it? I've not worded this question well, but what I'm trying to say is, like, do you think that people who are predisposed to like writing stories, telling stories, are naturally predisposed to play Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop RPG games, or do you think it's the other way around? From your own experience, how would you talk about the relationship between being an author and playing tabletop RPGs?
Well, I think the short answer to your question is absolutely. I think that anybody that is creative and enjoys telling a story, whether they are an actress or an actor, I see a lot of those these days when you watch Critical Role, or you see some of their guests that are on there, and surprised that at first, well, why is Vin Diesel Critical Role? Why is Joe Manganiello doing what he's doing with death saves? And then you realize, oh, well, they're not that different than me. Instead of them standing on a stage or in front of a camera and doing it, I'm sitting at a computer and typing it. But at the end of the day, they're still telling a story. They're doing it physically, where I'm doing it more mentally or emotionally. And I think that they would naturally be drawn to this type of game. It takes a Monopoly or a Parcheesi and puts it on steroids, right? And now it's just not a strategy game or a fun game you're playing, or on a board. You're now playing it in your mind, and you're able to do things. It's just a different level. It's playing the difference between chess and checkers. And I think that helps not only develop your storytelling, but then for someone like me who's trying to move into the profession of storytelling, that's all practice, right? That's all college before the pros. And so I think that's exactly what I've done over a period of years. And I think that, to answer your question more specifically, that's what I think people like you and me and others that I've mentioned, that I think that's why they gravitate towards this kind of stuff. They want to be good storytellers. And I've seen, the likes of Matt Mercer do it on Critical Role, or frankly, I keep using that as an example, but there are a dozen different, online folks that I watch on a regular basis. And that helps me become a better DM. It also helps me see the difference, because, we're still using in some of my gaming, we're still using rules from the first edition, the AD&D stuff back in the day. So it's a bit of true, right? We're not there's nothing that we can't throw out that we don't like. But I see how other DMs DM it, And I think that also helps me with my storytelling. Of course it does. I get to see
Yeah,
how other people are doing it and how they connect the dots and what I might be doing wrong or what I could be doing better. And I think that affects my writing.
I definitely Joe Manganiello again, fellow Steeler fan. Just saying.
Fellow Pittsburgher, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Critical Role and stuff has shown us like the power of the storytelling of D&D and stuff as well. Like I think we would be remiss to neglect the effect that Critical Role has had on the D&D and tabletop RPG renaissance of this decade and that I think's going on this past decade that was going on, because like they've been so, I feel as if Critical Role's been so instrumental, so it is a good example. I know that a lot of people might take umbrage with that and say, well, there's Acquisitions Incorporated and High Rollers and stuff like that, but I think you can't say D&D nowadays without Critical Role, so I understand they're kind of symbiotic, and they are a fantastic example of that group storytelling from fantastic voice actors and actresses. So yeah, maybe you're right that it, because they're a colourful group of people, and then when you look at all the different casts, they're colourful groups of people with creative minds, and they create these great characters and these great storylines and adapt to these crazy situations that they must just want to be great storytellers, and they end up telling great stories,
That's exactly right. I mean, I think that's right to the heart of your question, right? And if you rewind the clock 10 years ago, that was an impossibility. What there weren't esports, there wasn't Twitch, there wasn't, and now there was no need for the T in the T before RPG 20 years ago.
Sorry, I think he just dropped out and he's had to rejoin. So,
No problem.
sorry again for the technical difficulties. There have been several. So we were saying about how, to the heart of my question, that that 20 years ago you couldn't do what we're doing now with like all these Twitch streams and stuff just to catch people up quickly, because there was no Twitch, there was no TT in tabletop RPG. It was just RPG games.
There's a greater community than there was, and I think when you said before the renaissance of the game, it's because now other people, like, it was impossible for me to play with some friends when I couldn't Skype with them. Now I play with players that are in Kentucky, players that are in Florida, and they're all playing with me in Pennsylvania at the same time. And that was impossible 20 years ago. And it was impossible to compare notes. Like I can watch these other games, online, and I can watch them and how they've merged, tabletop RPGs into video games to capture the gamer community. And now it's one big community, and it's going to continue to grow in that direction. And there has been a resurgence in that. And I think that's important, not only for the game, but the industry. And we're learning how to play it differently. And so, I think that's all good for the history of the game and where,
Yeah, I
in the
think it's
direction
a
it's
really
going.
good thing as well, like getting it out there, because I think as well in our current world space, and this might sound a bit political, it doesn't mean to be, but like we yearn for that human connection now because of like social media, like especially the pandemic and stuff like that. So even with, I feel as if like video games and stuff don't offer us that human interaction that tabletop RPGs do. Even when we play them in virtual forums and virtual spaces, like it is a very human experience, working together, telling this story together, like having that personal connection. Whereas the more competitive, and sometimes toxic video game behavior and culture or social media, veneer that happens, you don't always get that human connection. So I think tabletop RPGs are brilliant for that, and I often credit tabletop RPGs for helping me through some of the worst times in my life, saving my marriage at a very difficult time. So yeah, I think that want for human connection is really important.
100%.
Yeah.
I think you've summarized
So
that very well.
before anything else craps out on us, because my good friend Craig Bot is obviously having a bit of a slow one today, bless him. He's usually pretty reliable, but for some reason, just not today. But hopefully I've got both of these download links and I can splice it together, cut it up a bit, and put it back together again. Or if not, we'll Frankenstein sponsor this somehow. So before we go and we give you your opportunity to like shout out Joe and like talk about your books and your serials and everything, I want to ask you one question. Are you ready to face the deck of many questions?
Yes, I am, and my number is 13. You don't even have to ask.
Your number is 13. So just for those of you who are listening, the deck of many questions is our little segment where we ask our guests to pick a question from our deck of 1 to, I think there's 75 now questions. 1 to 75 questions. You can submit questions on our social medias, on our YouTube, anywhere basically you can get in contact with us. You can submit questions and you can stack the deck for and against us. Some of them are spicy as hell, some of them are a bit meh. So let's have a look at 13. I'm hoping this is a spicy question, but it might not be now. So question 13 was submitted by Paige, our friend. What is the most ridiculous thing a player has done in your game? So what is the most ridiculous thing a player has done in your game?
So recently I had a Dragonborn member of the party decide that he was going to fly alone into an infernal creature's lair, and that creature was also surrounded by 5 or 6 other powerful allies, and he decided for his attack to breathe 12 points of acid on the creature that was known as the Demon Flame. So within one round, that character was dispatched, and we had to have a new one started. So that might have been the most unbelievable thing, because it was so obvious not to do it, yet he did it anyway. But I will say this is the same player who has also set the record in my lifetime for also triggering the same amount of spheres of annihilation on himself. 3 times he has been killed by spheres of annihilation with 3 different DMs. And so I don't know how he hasn't learned not
what like how what? So, like how
yeah, so the first one was back in AD&D times, and there was a homebrew character that came out in one of the Dragon magazines called Demonist, and Windrider the Demonist decided that he was going to try to touch a sphere of annihilation that a wizard was moving telekinetically into attack. And you would think that a demonist would at least be aware that a floating black sphere should not be touched.
Not good,
right? But of course he went to go and touch it, and he went away. That was not me DMing. That was a friend of mine, and let's say that ended very poorly for Windrider. And then I was redoing the new Tomb of Horrors that came out. I forget the name of it. It's Return. It's not the Return. It's something. The new Tomb of Horrors. And in there, I reminded all the characters before they went into the tomb, don't do stupid things, because this is designed to kill you if you do stupid things. And of course, there was the balls at the end of one of the first hallways that are, sitting there. One of them is black, and he decided to crawl into the sphere of annihilation that I warned him 15 minutes prior to not to do, and he killed himself. And then thirdly, the third DM, which we're playing with now, also had it was a sort of a bag of holding thing where it got torn asunder. He was trapped, and it becomes basically a sphere of annihilation and destroys him. So 3 different DMs, 3 different spheres, 3 different deaths, same player character. So that's probably the craziest from a longevity perspective. But then the same guy flying in to fight the Demon Flame, probably not a good idea. And what's the difference if you die in a sphere of annihilation or for a flaming sword of fire? I don't know. He's had his share of deaths.
Yeah. Okay, then. So you also get to pick a number for me this time around, because it's just the 2 of us, and so if you would like, you can pick a number between 1 and 75 for myself, and I will answer that question honestly to you.
Sure. So since you like Juju Smith-Schuster, I'm going to pick number 19 for you.
19, my boy. So, that was when there was 3 of us, but it says who is the best DM. So I'm gonna change this question because there used to be 3 hosts on here, but different, like adult life and all that jazz. It said of the 3 of us, who is the best DM, i.e. to cause a fight. But I would say, but I will talk about all 3 of us and what makes us good DMs. So I'll say what is the best thing about us 3 DMing. So there was my friend Troy, and my friend Leon. Now my friend Leon is very much a random table guy. He loves random tables. He will roll dice at any opportunity, and I feel personally victimized by these random table generated battles and stuff like that. So I think Leon is great at making campaigns feel dangerous, because sometimes in D&D it can get to a point where you just like, I can obliterate anything and there's no fear of anything anymore. And I think that's actually quite sad. Like, but Leon could genuinely make any encounter feel threatening. Like, even when it was supposed to be a good encounter. Like,
Yeah, I call that
we played
laundering damage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sucks up half your spells and half
He
your hit points, and you got fighting a
yeah.
bugbear or whatever.
Yeah, he bloody, and so he rolled on a random generator for 4 level 3 characters and rolled like 8 dire wolves. That's like, I guess I die. But yeah, and then I shot someone in the foot because I was angry. Well, my character was angry, so I shot someone in the foot in Curse of Strahd. So he was, before COVID, was researching angry mob rules. Because I basically shot the mayor of the town. I'm guessing I shot somebody very important because another person who'd played Strahd before. As soon as I loaded my crossbow, I was like, "No!" And I went, "No!" And they were like, "I cannot believe you've just done this." Like, she was like, "Oh." So he's really good at that. He's very good at like making it threatening and challenging his players to fight and make decisions. My friend Troy used to host this podcast, makes very rich worlds that tell a story, like Circumstance, and the world he creates is amazing. He built like this basically like Central America-esque world, like almost Incas and Aztec inspired world with like lizard folk riding dinosaurs instead of like horses and stuff. And it was so cool. It was like this colonial mission to colonize this place, and it was about making it so that people could live there. And it was so good, and that world breathed. It was amazing. So yeah. And then my thing is, I'm a very character driven storyteller. So if I find anything that I can grab onto for your character, I will run with it, and I will introduce, like, so Troy, who still plays in my campaign now, he wanted to make a character who basically was the new warlock genie, the genie warlock, sorry. He was an Air Genasi, and he wanted basically his patron to be his mother, but his mother's trapped in his like sword with him, so she has to like come with him wherever he goes. And so we made a massive part of his story arc, basically him trying to restore not just her but his sight as well, because one of the problems with them being together was that it made him blind. So they found a powerful wizard, they found a powerful sorcerer. She cast wish and let his mother out, and he got his eyes. And one of the things that I just did is that he like met one of the other characters in the hallway, and how he saw was almost like Tremor Sense, like Toph Beifong-esque, like with the wind. Like I can see people's outlines and stuff, but I can't see colors. So I just said to him, like, Luro's hair is very purple, like he didn't quite catch it at first, and he was like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "Well, Luro has long purple hair, like, and he's got tan skin." And I basically started describing like the colors of him, and you heard Troy just go, "No way!" And he went downstairs, and his like genie mum was just sat there, like, "Hey, how you doing?" And now she's trying to marry him off to multiple other Genasi. Like, so Turns out she might not be that nice a guy. But yeah, so I'm very story orientated, character story orientated. Troy's very settings, and Leon loves a good fight. So that is how I'm going to answer that question. That's what makes us the best 3DMs, in my opinion. So yeah, that has been us in the Pod of Many Things. I'd like to thank Joe for his patience and coming on despite the time difference and working and stuff. I do really appreciate your time. So Joe, plug yourself, tell us what you've got coming up, tell us where we can find your stuff. I'll make sure to get the links on the YouTube video and stuff. But yeah, tell us about it, let the people know.
Sure. So the first book, and thank you again for hosting me. I appreciate you allowing me the time to come on the show, and I'd be more than happy to do it at any point. The Last Keeper will come out. There's the launch date hasn't been set yet, but we're looking at late spring, early summer. I'll keep you apprised as to when that happens, but it'll be available as, paper copy on Amazon or, Kindle Direct Publishing, among some other places, for electronic copies if you prefer to the e-read, as well as the potential of an audiobook, which is to be determined at this point. Website is, jvhilliard.com, and happy to, keep you guys informed as to new publications that do come out. And of course, I mentioned earlier the Altered Reality magazine, which is alteredrealitymag.com. And you can read my serial, The Element of Time, which was just released on March 1 under their serials button at the top of the page. So thanks again for the plug, and thanks again for the opportunity to come on the show.
No, it's been great. I as somebody who is who would I used to call myself a writer. I haven't written in a while, so I would need to re-earn that title. But someone who was a writer and was interested in the scene and wrote poetry and prose and stuff like that. My degree is in creative writing, so like it's really cool to be able to like. And people might be like, "Oh well, it's only somebody who's had one novel published," but that's it. That's the start. That's where you want to be. You want your first novel published. So to have somebody who's had that is an amazing opportunity for me. So I thank you as well.
Yeah, my pleasure. Anytime, my friend.
No worries. So yeah, my friends, it's that time. Whoever you are, wherever you are, whenever you are, I hope you're safe. I hope you're well. I've been Addison, your friendly favourite Furbolg. This has been the Pod of Many Things. I've been here with Joe Hilliard, and I'll see you soon. Peace out. Bye.